And on that, I mean, we want to bring in the big man himself, because he's still like, Bernie's still the guy, right? Bernie's still the one who can do this so well, who, isn't tailing nobody, who's I think speaks like very clearly on this, and is why, he's been able to maintain his popularity. I'll say it again, Bernie would have won in 16. I think probably had a good shot in 20. So the coalition there was a little, I don't know, all over the place, unfortunately, I think in the last round. But, Bernie, I think, represents a pretty strong, like, plain spoken American common sense when it comes to a lot of the problems that we have in this country. And I think this clip just really highlights it. This is from a couple days ago with former White House press secretary, now MSNBC host, Jen Psaki. And let's just play this for a second, because I think Bernie hits some really
people got mad. He hits a nerve with some people on Twitter, that's for sure.
Yeah.
In a recent CNN poll, 58% of Republicans without a four-year college degree said nominating Trump again would give the party its best chance of winning in 2024. And you have warned about not focusing on issues that are important to a range of workers, Americans in the working class. Are Democrats underestimating Trump? Is that something you're concerned about as you're watching?
Of course they're underestimating Trump. But the issue that we should ask ourselves is, how does it happen when you have a pathological liar who is a billionaire who could care less about working class people, ends up with so much working class support? And the reason is that for too many years, the Democratic leadership has turned its back on working people. So you'll have today a minimum wage which remains at $7.25 an hour. That makes sense? You are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people as a human right. Talking to you 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They spend one half as much as we do per capita. You guarantee health care to all people. We pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. We have corporations who are making it harder for workers to join unions. We have a child care system, which is a total disaster. Do you think we are paying attention to the needs of the working class in this country? Billionaires are doing phenomenally well. It's time we stood up with work for working people and fought for a government and a society that work for all of us. And when you do that, I think people will see the fraudulent nature of somebody like Donald Trump.
I mean, let's talk about the people getting mad about this in a second, right? Like, let's just highlight why this is why Bernie is such a great communicator, but it's also like why he's like a good dude. Because what is he saying there? He's like, it's a travesty that somebody like Trump is able to get any kind of support from working class people, because he's a fraud. He's somebody who represents the billionaire, the class, the most powerful people in this country, the people responsible for a lot of the pain and suffering that millions of working class people are facing in this country. But instead of doing this kind of classic, like, well, all these people are so stupid, all these people are this or that, he's saying it's a travesty, and it's because of the failures of, the supposed opposition party or the opposite party to be able to be a party that represents working class interests, right? The only reason that Trump is able to exist is because the Democratic Party has turned their back on working people and have done so for a very, very long time. And then he goes on to put, I think, in very concrete terms, what a working class party, or at least a party that was interested in working class people, would be doing in this moment, right? Like, it's just like that is like, if you were to teach a class like Bernie Communication Style 101, like, that's it, right? That 90 seconds right there covers almost every stupid debate we have in politics right now. And is able to finish it in like a minute.
Yeah, and I can't help but, like, the Democratic Party supporters that are quick to post like, actually Trump won exclusively because of racial resentment. It's like, why don't people turn out, and why do these college numbers look so bad for Democrats? It was a specific, explicit policy by 1980s like New Democrats, the Democratic Leadership Council. They have policy papers or strategy papers saying, hey, we're going after blue collar folks. We're going after professional classes. Labor is over. That stuff's done. And this is going to be our new base. And you know what? It's like not worked out. And the idea, and this whole like rush to shelter the party from that criticism is a really big problem, because like that is like, I mean, fundamentally the reality of our situation here.
And look, you can't, I'm sorry, at this point, if you look at, for example, the swing between 2012 and 2016, right? people who voted for Obama and then went to Trump. I'm sorry, you just can't make that argument anymore, in my opinion, and be able to stand on your own 2 feet. When you also see the Republican Party being able to make inroads in like Tejano, Hispanic, working class communities and Black communities, right? We're not saying winning majorities or anything like that, but winning, like picking up votes. This kind of argument. I just don't think holds a lot of water, and it lets people off of the hook because it's something that's has been happening nationally, and has been actually happening for a couple decades. It has only really accelerated in between 2010 and 2020, right? And like I think it's you don't have to be somebody who spends a lot of time looking over exit poll and numbers, right? Or somebody who's like really clued in to be for it to be very, very clear that the Democratic Party is absolutely looking right now to represent the educated, more comfortable, not the elite, but like nicer situation than most other folks. That's where they're going, right? Biden's whole thing, like whenever people say like, well, Biden did this, Biden did that, it's like, well, where is Biden winning? Where's Biden picking up support? Biden is picking up support in traditional Republican controlled areas in the suburbs, right? So like you can't you know what I'm saying? Like you can't sit here and act and ignore class de-alignment, right? Which is like this idea that a lot of working class voters are either tuning out of politics completely or in lots of areas like in Minnesota, like in Texas, are flipping over to the Republican Party. That's bad if you want to fight for working class politics. That's bad if you want to build a strong left in this country. It may not be bad, right, for Biden and like the Democratic Party, right? If they just want to do a shift, a flip over who represents like, certain kinds of elites in this country, right? They can figure some math out to make that work for them, right?
Yeah.
22 an example in some ways, right? Because there is no working class alternative for people. And when it comes down to it, it's like, Bernie's used this phrase a couple times before, so I'll throw it out there. We've talked about this on the show. I still cannot stand the framing and the phrasing around, voting against your interests, right? Because we opened this whole show talking about what the Republicans are doing, but you can look all across this country and you look at inequality, you look at what life is like for working people. You can have virtual democratic super control over state governments all across this country, and you see those results for working people are not delivering the kind of things that people are acting as if is sort of being dangled in front of voters when they go to vote for in a presidential election. Just not true. Biden said he would veto Medicare for all if it came to him. Right. Like these are not questions that are being brought to people on a regular basis. And like, this kind of idea that, and like, I'm talking to the left here. I'm not talking to the MSNBC crowd or any folks like this. But this kind of idea that basically what we need to do in this country is like build up, is to get the left and to get the working class movement to basically tail the Democrats until enough time has passed that the Republicans are just like politically marginalized, right? And then we can fight with them is BS. I do think, for example, that it's worthwhile, and I'm not saying that like I think that, for example, like a strategy like a DSA strategy to maybe run people on a Democratic Party ballot line is inherently harmful. The strategy there with breaking is not to win Democratic Party power, universally in this country and then to break, but rather to say we need to build up an organization and a movement that's strong enough to be able to stand on our own 2 feet to fight for folks, right? But I find more and more that like the strategy, which is that's called the dirty break strategy, right? What I'm finding more and more from a lot of people are like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. They consume a lot of political media. They think about these things. They're passionate about these things, but they might not be involved. They might not be an organization, right? I'm seeing more and more this kind of idea that basically what we should be doing is tailing the Democrats for a prolonged period of time, and that's a death sentence to anything that the Bernie Sanders movement represented or like inspired in this country. Because when you look at people, for example, who might have swung Obama to Trump or maybe Obama to non-voter, across the board, I thought this thing was going to be helpful for me and change my life for the better. And in a lot of ways, my life got worse. And in a lot of ways, the people who I thought they were going to come out, like the banks, the financiers, all that kind of stuff after the Great Recession, they seem to be doing better than ever. And me and my community are continuing to suffer. Yeah. You're muted, Matt.
Sorry. Remember this, beauty? If we broke up the big banks tomorrow, and I will, if they deserve it, if they pose a systemic risk, I will. Would that end racism? Would that end sexism? Yeah, I mean, why didn't...
Functionally, that's like the Democratic Party. Like, you see them trying to do that. People, if they want more info on this, you can listen to a conversation with Matt Huber from his book talking about climate change as class war, right? It's like, this fixation with moving away from the fight with the capitalist class, with the owners in society, with the people in power in society, and sort of holding up vague things like racism and sexism. And I'm not saying those aren't like real experience things, but the way that Hillary Clinton's talking about it, the way that Biden talks about it, it's like an imagined force, right? Instead of what these actually are, right? It's like, you talk about immigrant hate in this country. Well, a reason that exists in this country is because it's used to push people into the margins of society so that their kids can work at a Hyundai factory, right? And nobody will fight for them, right? That is racism, yes, but it's racism that like exists to fuel an institution of private profit for corporations. And like the way that the Democrats like to talk about this is like these are just sort of like genetic inheritances of people instead of reflections of very, very specific material relations and reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and it's wild. Like, we have this concern over corporations sort of grooming people towards being LGBT friendly, but that's just, them masking what's going on in their supply lines with public relations. And and they're making their workforce happier.
And we didn't talk about this. We didn't even plan like a full segment on this, but remember we talked about the Tennessee stuff that happened, right? And there was like two responses to that. One, like, we're going to show up and fight and say we don't accept this. And then there was that same kind of chatter in class, like, oh, this is going to be really big for the Democrats in 2024, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, these are two very, very different models and ideas of how to deal with the threats from the right. Because one thing that gets frustrating for me whenever you talk about this kind of stuff, you talk about what the Democrats are doing in office, what they represent, Biden is putting Trump's policies on the border and making them permanent, right? When you talk about stuff like that, where they say, well, the right wants to do bad things too. And it's like, yeah, I want to beat the right. I want to beat the right. And it seems like keeping the boogeyman of the right wing in power and emboldening them in a lot of ways, like the Democratic Party has done under Biden. I mean, fuck, Biden is now chasing after the right. If you've been paying attention in 2023, becoming even more right wing than he was before, at least in terms of what his actual policies have been. And again, for what, right? No one who is like going to be inspired by Trump saying, I want to build a wall is going to be inspired because Biden is saying, oh, we're going to do Trump policy, right? You have to beat the right. And what we're saying is that the way the Democratic Party is structured, the interests of the Democratic Party is they aren't interested in actually actively doing that. So, we have to be smart in how we build a movement that can win. Right? You can't just say we're done with politics, we're sitting out. But this idea that basically like the job of the left is just sort of like, being an enforcer for the complacency of the Democratic Party is just wrong fucking headed. And it just condemns us to more and more generations of the same kind of politics and these same kind of failures. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, folks, from cradle to grave, that's the current situation, but hopefully we can build something that can change that. We're going to go over to the post-game, patreon.com/leftreckoning. You can leave us a message if you wanted to talk about any of the things we covered today or something else even, as long as it's normal. 1940-289-7234. Matt and I will be over there in just a couple of minutes to hang out with y'all. And for everyone else, see y'all soon.
Oh, yeah, we'll be talking about putting fingers Ron also as well.
I can't wait for that.